Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome to Let's Have Renaissance, a podcast about writing, editing, publishing, literature, the arts, and more. I am Ito Otini.
And I'm Makaya Otini, and today we're speaking with David Molesky. David's paintings explore the space between organic abstraction and figuration rooted in mythological tradition. His work has been featured in the New York Times, The Washington Post, New American Painting, and American Arts Quarterly, and in permanent collections at Long Beach Museum of Art, the Iloilo Museum of Contemporary Art in the Philippines, and elsewhere. He's also been to residencies around the world. We're excited to be with him today.
Thank you for tuning in. We're excited that you're here. Why don't you also subscribe, like, comment, and share this episode with your friends?
And if you know anyone who wants to come on the podcast, please do send them our way. Also, if you haven't yet, sign up for our free newsletter where we share updates, resources, and opportunities. To support the podcast, you can make a one-time donation through our website or purchase a subscription to our blog where you'll find more premium content and resources at thedatekeepers.com. Thank you for being a part of our community.
David, thank you so much for joining us. We're excited to have you. Can you please tell us about yourself?
Yes, thank you very much for this opportunity. I am a painter foremost who's dabbled in some writing, mostly because I enjoy telling stories. But my interests also are in the natural world and organic forms and forces of nature. Those are favorite subjects of mine when I'm painting, which is mostly in oils.
Do you think in stories in both painting and writing, or just when you write?
It depends on the subject matter, but when I think about a story, it's very pictorial and very experiential. You know, when I'm telling a story to someone, I often do a lot of hand gestures and I act it out. And part of me really believes that I'm back in that moment that I'm describing.
Well, you can do as many hand gestures as you want, but you're going to have to then describe those hand gestures because we're doing audio only.
I know. I'm holding the computer, so don't worry.
Okay, so your hands are otherwise engaged.
Yes.
Well, I hope that doesn't make you less expressive.
No, I think it channels it. And when I was in grade school, my teachers often made me sit on my hands because my hands were always doing something.
Can you tell us more about your practice and how it's changed over time?
Yeah, I mean, I had worked as a figurative painter for a long time, and I still do figurative narrative painting. But what I've done recently is I've replaced the main protagonist with an ordinary banana as a solution to just this feeling of rules and restrictions. I had an idea because sometimes I don't have the concept first. So usually a visual idea comes to my mind purely as a visual idea. And then as I'm working, I start to realize the associations I have to it. And I realize the undertext of the actual concept that was inside of it, but it's packaged within the visual idea, and that comes first. So I had this idea for a banana painting that just came like a flash to my mind. I was at my parents' house, and my dad has Cheerios with a cut up banana in it every morning. And I was working on a body of work inspired by the Ukrainian Revolution, figures with fire, and was getting ready for some exhibitions. And there was a photograph of the Ebola outbreak. So this was back in like 2014. And I had this idea that the body bag should be a banana. And I just tried to shake the image from my head, but it kept coming back to me over the years. And so finally, after about 4 years of it just not leaving my mind and resurfacing, I decided to make a painting of it. And the response to it was enormous. Like, people were scrambling to buy it, but it sold very quickly. And I was doing other types of figurative work as my main focus at that time. And so I was like, well, maybe I'll just make another one of those banana paintings. It was just this kind of ridiculous back burner idea that I would visit every once in a while. But then I was challenged by a gallery to make it a front burner idea. And from there, then I would challenge myself, well, why am I attracted to it? What was so significant about it? I realized that there was kind of a classical structure to that one particular composition and that it related to deposition paintings. So images of people carrying Christ to burial, which in the Renaissance, they based those images on Roman sarcophagus relief images of a hero burial. And then I connected the banana to, male phallic to men and hero images, and then saw that there was a benefit to doing that because in today's figurative world, there's such an emphasis on identity. What is the identity of the artist and what type of identity are you portraying? And it just seemed like a way for me as a male to talk about the old monomyth without creating another depiction of, my own identity.
And it introduces a satirical element too, it seems.
Yes.
And it seems like also you're then stepping into the role of critic toward your own work, which is an interesting stance. And I think some artists and writers are always hesitant to do that. And I'm always excited when I see somebody doing that in relation to their own work. And I think there's a difference between sometimes we set out and we say, okay, I am going to make a piece of art about X to communicate Y. And that's a little bit different than making the thing and then looking back at it and thinking, what is this thing that I've just made? What is it doing and what is it saying? And it's different when you actually find yourself in the role of interpreting your own work when you come to it without a conscious awareness of what it might mean. Do you ever have works where you set out with a fixed interpretation in mind in advance, or do you typically find yourself playing that interpretive role after having created some or all of the work?
Yeah, definitely the latter. As a visual artist and also a very intuitive person, that's basically how I navigate life, is by my gut feeling. While I'm looking and thinking about what the work does, how it associates into other work from the canon of art history or contemporary work or even the history of my own work, because I've been painting for over 30 years now in oil. And also just conversations and dialogues with other painters who are friends of mine. That's been one of the very best parts about being an artist, is the community of other artists that I've come to know, the people that I've met on my path. That's really one of the best parts.
And I'm curious about AI. Do you think AI can and will produce a good visual art? And is it possible to know the difference between art that is human made versus AI? What are those signs?
Well, you can train your own AI model on like a particular type of imagery, or there are artists who create their own AI to create their own work so that it's not pooling from the big generic scraping of the internet. And, after I'd started this work with Bananas, one of my friends in New York was dabbling in AI to see if it could generate any new ideas for his own work. He was like, well, let's sit down at the computer. Let's try this. And the results were terrible. It looked cartoony. It was worse than a cartoon. It was just so bad. But that was 2021. And then I thought a couple years later, maybe I'll try to revisit it, see if it can do this particular thing that I can easily just do in my own head. And so I gave it a very specific prompt and it just gave me an error signal. It wouldn't even do it at all. So I haven't had any luck with it whatsoever for my own work, but I do know other artists who use it to generate images. But what it's doing, like it is for writing, is it's gathering this averaging of everything, which isn't carrying the unique grit of humanity. So, the thing that I love about painting is the surface and the language of how this one particular person who spent time in front of this surface or this object, how did they move the paint around? I love that part about painting the most, more than the subject matter, more than anything else. So when I go to a museum, I feel like the subject matter is sort of like the outer atmosphere of the planet. And I just want to get through that and go right to the surface, because that's where the life lives. That's where the texture and the sense of touch is, the sensuality of the paint, which relates back to an individual who made the work. I think that's fascinating. And in that are imperfections and curious decisions. And I think that's probably also the same for writing. And sure, I've tried writing using AI to like clean up an email or something. First, you're like, oh, wow, yeah, it did make that sense better. But then it's like, oh, you really have no clue of like what I'm trying to say there. And like,
Yeah,
it just makes,
it's so funny because I heard a lot of people say that they used AI to write a book, and I was like, wow. Because a book for me is like, oh, something that takes a lot of energy, a lot of time. And I think it's because we all want to be writers and artists. There's a lot of noise out there, and I don't think AI will ever make something that a talented human being with, thoughts and skills will be able to.
yeah. And I think it's important to help people see the difference. I mean, even with painting in digital technology before AI, and just people seeing work online. As creatives, we also need to help educate people to see the humanistic qualities in the work. I mean, that's very scary that all the humanities and universities and schools are kind of disappearing. And I don't know what we'll do without those tools. Will people just kind of make the decision on their own that they want more a sense of not living in a matrix or some kind of a digital computer game? Are they going to want like more tangible things? I mean, sometimes there are hopeful signs that younger generations are starting to turn their back to the over digitization of our world.
I mean, it's not really that I'm not concerned about educational institutions, because I'm very much concerned about them, but
Uh-huh.
I'm not concerned about AI as a cause of educational breakdown, because I think all AI is doing is revealing how broken those systems already were. And if
Okay.
anything, that may actually be a good thing, because it may accelerate the collapse of those systems and the emergence of something more functional. And I don't know for sure that that will happen. Maybe those systems will collapse and nothing more functional will emerge, and that will be rather dire for all of us. But nothing functional can emerge while those systems are still in place, taking up space. So
Mhm.
it seems to me that either AI is an accelerant of a positive process in that regard, or it's an accelerant of the negative thing that already was happening at a slower pace, which is that most educational institutions are no longer training people to think critically and are no longer giving people a deep, immersive experience in the arts. I can't really speak for the sciences or other fields because I don't have enough firsthand experience there, but the humanities are already in a bad way. And
Right.
I mean, I taught for 4 years before AI was on the scene.
Uh-huh.
It was pretty rough. Students were showing up at college not able to summarize things that they'd read, not able to differentiate an advertisement from an article. And these were known problems, but they weren't urgent enough for there to be like a systemic response to them. And I don't really know what's going to happen next. I don't know if there will be a systemic reorganization, but there just needs to be a deep rethinking of what education actually is and what the goal of it should be.
Right. Yeah. And it seems that it's hard for people to know what careers they're educating for.
Well, I think because not everyone is meant to go to college. I came from North Africa where most people don't go to college, not because they don't want to, but it's really hard. We have a French system and we have what we call baccalaureate exam, which is the 12th grade. And every June, students make news. You only have one chance in your life to pass high school. If you don't, there's no university for you. I remember I was sick in my high school exam. Sunday night, I wished I could be in an emergency room, but I had to come to school because my exam starts on Monday. If I didn't come, there's no way for me. I would never make it to college. And yes, it was hard, but I think the filter is very useful. And if we tell people like, hey, there's no shame in expressing that you want to become a plumber or, the house cleaner, or like not expect everyone to get an MBA or, a degree in communications or whatever. Just let people follow their guts and let them do what they want to do. But I think societies all over the world try to push people to do what they think is good for them. For example, in Morocco, if you major in humanities, you are considered dumb, no matter how good you are. And for people who go to study science, I know people who failed because they were never good at that and they never passed high school. They just ended up being drug addicts and not doing what they like. And that's actually in a lot of countries.
Yeah, I definitely noticed that idea of doing things that you're not passionate about and to please your parents. And that was my big turnoff from pursuing medicine or science when I was at Berkeley.
I actually think that may even be the origin of the narrative that the sciences are more difficult than the humanities.
Yes.
I think it's that you have a lot more people in the sciences who don't have a passion for it, and so the difficulty is more salient. And in the humanities, the people who end up there, a higher percentage of them are actually passionate about the subject, and so it doesn't
Yeah.
seem as difficult. And I'm just a little bit skeptical of the idea that any given field, when properly practiced, is essentially easier or harder than any other field. I think any field can present a challenge, a maximum challenge to anyone who takes it far enough. But if you are passionate enough about it to meet that challenge, you maybe will not notice how difficult it is because you will be fully engaged.
Yeah, passion. You're talking about high school and stuff. I had a really great teacher. And after graduating, I sought out other artists to work with. And when I've asked all these people, what do I do? Thank you for teaching me all of these things. How can I pay you back? And they pretty much all said the same thing. And that is make something great. I hope I can do that. Yeah.
Thank you so much for making the time. We really enjoyed having you.
Likewise.
And keep creating.
Yeah, keep it up.